Eddie Hearn first started doing interviews and letting you guys know about, the potential rematch between Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz, how do we say his last name? Obviously, as you know, Eddie Hearn normally does the talking for Anthony Joshua. That's just the way it is. He normally is the dude who does the talking. It's not like, there's some heavyweights that they do the talking for themselves. For example, Tyson Fury. He does the talking. Normally, he's the one who responds to interviews and stuff like that. Deontay Wilder, another guy, he's normally the guy who does the talking. But when they first started talking to Eddie Hearn, because of course, like I said, he normally does the talking for Anthony Joshua, they were asking him, where do you guys want this fight to be made? And Eddie Hearn said that for himself, he would of course want the fight to happen in the UK. He wants it in the UK, because obviously that's going to be a good thing for Joshua. But when they asked him, when they would ask him, what about Joshua? Where does Anthony Joshua want the rematch to happen? And Eddie Hearn came out and he said, the crazy thing is Joshua told me that he wants to, why don't they make the fight happen in Madison Square Garden, right? In the same place where he lost. And he thought, and Eddie Hearn says, he thought that was like, he could, and then, he basically was trying to say, that's the kind of guy Joshua is, right? He wants to fight back in the place where he lost. And he kept saying this, he kept singing this tune, Eddie Hearn, that Joshua doesn't really mind. He really wants to fight in Madison Square Garden again. So I find it funny that when Sky Sports released that interview where Adam Smith was interviewing Deontay Wilder last night. Was interviewing Anthony Joshua the other day. I find it funny that he was basically telling Adam Smith that he wants the fight to happen in Cardiff, because I was under the impression that, he didn't care. He would love it if it happened, in Madison Square Garden again. I was always in the impression that Anthony Joshua really wanted it in Madison Square Garden because of what Eddie Hearn said. Because Eddie Hearn kept going around saying stuff like, Joshua actually wants it in Madison Square Garden again. He thinks it's only right to beat Ruiz in the place where he lost against him. That's what Eddie Hearn kept feeding the media every time they interviewed him. But it turns out that wasn't the case, because Joshua was basically telling everyone in that interview that, what? He was saying, okay, if it happens in another place, fine. But he kept saying that he wanted it to happen in the UK. So it's obvious to me that Anthony Joshua really wants this rematch in the UK. He really wants it in the UK. So my question is, why does Anthony Joshua want it in the UK? If I'm believing Eddie Hearn, where Eddie Hearn said that Anthony Joshua wanted it back in Madison Square Garden, my question to Eddie Hearn and to Anthony Joshua is, how come he changed his mind then? A few weeks ago, Eddie Hearn was preaching that Anthony Joshua would love to have the fight back in Madison Square Garden. But now, in this interview, it's obvious that he really wants it in the UK. So my question, like I said, is why does he want it in the UK now? Is it because he understands that maybe it's going to give him an advantage? Maybe he was, I don't know, maybe he got like a little homesick when he was fighting over there in Madison Square Garden? Is that why? That's all I want to know. Why is now he's really eager for this fight to happen in the UK when he was supposed to be trying to get this fight back over there? I personally think maybe Eddie Hearn was bullshitting all along. Maybe Anthony Joshua always wanted it in the UK. But of course, Eddie Hearn, being a promoter, he wanted to make people believe that no, Anthony Joshua is a warrior, and of course he wants to have the fight in Madison Square Garden, because he doesn't care where it happens, but it's pretty obvious he wants it in the UK, man. That's all I'm saying.